corporate governance, and social responsibilities.
Good day everyone, my name is Nina and welcome to our BA 100 class. For this video, we are going to tackle about the models of corporate governance from developed capital markets. But first, let us know why there is a need for a model.
Okay, so the essence of the model is to evaluate the crafted principles which are applied to the logic of governance. From the word logic itself, that is continuous learning oversight, guidance, information, and culture.
So in each country, the corporate governance structure has certain characteristics or constituent elements which distinguish it from structures in other countries. To date, researchers have identified 3 models of corporate governance in developed capital markets.
So there are the Anglo-US model, the Japanese model, and the German model. But for this video, we are going to focus more about the Japanese model for corporate governance.
So the flow in this video is let's get to know more about the corporate governance in Japan. Then we are going to identify the following constituent elements in the Japanese model. First, who are the key players in the corporate governance? Second, the share ownership pattern. And third, the composition of the board of directors. Fourth, the regulatory framework. Fifth, the disclosure requirements for publicly listed stock corporation. Then sixth, corporate actions requiring shareholder approval. And lastly, the interaction among key players. Ato lang ni silang bansay-bansayon guys sa according sa akong nga research. So dagan-dagan sad no, but the purpose is to at least we may be able to identify that the corporate governance structure in each country develops in response to country-specific factors and conditions. So magdepende lang na siya. So going back to the Japanese model.
The Japanese model is the outlier of the 3. Governance patterns take shape in light of 2 dominant legal relationships. One between shareholders, customers, suppliers, creditors, and employee unions, which is the German model. And the other is between administrators, managers, and shareholders, which is the Anglo-US model. So here, in the Japanese model, this is characterized by a high level of stock ownership by affiliated banks and companies, a banking system characterized by strong long-term links between bank and corporation. So in here, there is a sense of joint responsibility and balance to the Japanese model. The Japanese word for this balance is keiritsu, which roughly translates to loyalty between suppliers and customers. In practice, this balance takes the form of defensive posturing and distrust of new business relationships in favor of the old. While the board of directors composed almost solely of insiders and a comparatively low level of input of outside shareholders, and that is caused and exacerbated by complicated procedures for exercising shareholders' votes. Equity financing is important for Japanese corporations. However, insiders and their affiliates are the major shareholders in most Japanese corporations. Consequently, they play a major role in individual corporations and in the system as a whole. Conversely, the interests of outside shareholders are marginal. While the percentage of foreign ownership of Japanese stocks is small, but it may become an important factor in making the model more responsive to outside shareholders. So the question is, who are the key players in the Japanese model? The Japanese system of corporate governance is many-sided, centering around a main bank and a financial or industrial network or keiritsu. The main bank system and the keiritsu are 2 different, yet overlapping and complementary elements of the Japanese model. Almost all Japanese corporations have a close relationship with the main bank. The bank provides its corporate clients with loans as well as services related to bond issues, equity issues, settlement accounts, and related consulting services. The main bank is generally a major shareholder in the corporation. So in the Japanese model, the 4 key players are main bank, the affiliated companies are keiritsu, the management, and the government. Note that the interaction among these players serves to link relationships rather than balance powers, as is the case in the Anglo-US model. In contrast with the Anglo-US model, non-affiliated shareholders have little or no voice in Japanese governance. As a result, there are few truly independent directors, that is, directors representing outside shareholders. The Japanese model may be diagrammed as an open-ended hexagon. So as you can see in the figure, with 4 connecting lines, represents the linked interest of 4 key players: government, management, bank, and Keiretsu. The open lines at the top represents the no-linked interest of non-affiliated shareholders and outside directors, because these play an insignificant role. In terms of share ownership pattern in the Japanese model, in Japan, financial institutions and corporations firmly hold ownership of the equity market. Similar to the trend in the UK and US, the shift during the post-war period has been away from individual ownership to institutional and corporate ownership. In 1990s, financial institutions such as insurance companies and banks held approximately 43% of the Japanese equity market, and corporations excluding financial institutions held 25%, while the foreigners currently own approximately 3%. In both the Japanese and the German model, banks are key shareholders and develop strong relationships with corporations due to overlapping roles and multiple services provided by them. So moving on to the composition of the board of directors. The board of directors of Japanese corporations is composed almost completely of insiders, that is, executive managers, usually the heads of major divisions of the company and its central administrative body. If a company's profits fall over an extended period, the main bank and members of the Keiretsu may remove directors and appoint their own candidates to the company's board. Another practice common in Japan is the appointment of retiring government bureaucrats to corporate boards. For example, the Ministry of Finance may appoint a retiring official to a bank's board. So in the Japanese model, the composition of the board of directors is conditional upon the corporation's financial performance. Another information is the Japanese boards are generally larger than boards in the UK, the US, and Germany. The average Japanese board contains 50 members.
The regulatory framework in the Japanese model is that their government ministries have traditionally been extremely influential in developing industrial policy. The ministries also wield enormous regulatory control. However, in recent years, several factors have weakened the development and implementation of the comprehensive industrial policy. First, due to the growing role of Japanese corporations at home and abroad, policy formation became fragmented due to the involvement of numerous ministries. Most importantly, the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. Second, the increasing internationalization of Japanese corporations made them less dependent on their domestic market, and therefore somewhat less dependent on industrial policy. Third, the growth of Japanese capital markets led to their partial liberalization and an opening, albeit small, to global standards. While these and other factors have limited the cohesion of Japanese industrial policy in recent years, it is still an important regulatory factor, especially in comparison with the Anglo-US model. In contrast, government agencies provide little effective, independent regulation of the Japanese securities industry.
Disclosure requirements in Japan are relatively stringent, but not as stringent as in the US. Corporations are required to disclose a wide range of information in the annual report and/or agenda for the AGM, including financial data on the corporation required on a semi-annual basis, data on the corporation's capital structure, background information on each nominee to the board of directors, including name, occupation, relationship with the corporation, and ownership of stock in the corporation, aggregate date on compensation, namely the maximum amount of compensation payable to all executive officers and the board of directors, information on proposed mergers and restructurings, proposed amendments to the articles of associations, and names of individuals and/or companies proposed as auditors. In Japan, the routine corporate actions requiring shareholder approval are payment of dividends and allocation of reserves, election of directors, and appointment of auditors.
Other common corporate actions which also require shareholder approval include capital authorizations, amendments to the articles of associations, and or charter. For example, a change in the size or composition of the board of directors, or a change in approved business activities. Payment of retirement bonuses to directors and auditors, and increase to aggregate compensation ceilings for directors and auditors. Non-routine corporate actions which also require shareholder approval includes mergers, takeovers, and restructurings.
So as a conclusion, guys, this report has introduced to you more about on the Japanese model, and as what also my group mates introduced to you, the German and the Anglo-US model, which describe the constituent elements of each and demonstrate how each developed in response to country-specific factors and conditions. It should reflect that the fact that it is not possible to simply select a model and apply it to a given country. Instead, the process is dynamic. So, the corporate governance structure in each country develops again in response to country-specific factors and conditions. With the globalization of capital markets, each of these three models is opening to influence from other models, okay, while largely retaining its unique characteristics. Legal, economic, and financial specialists around the world can profit from a familiarity with each model, okay? So I hope that everything is clear and that you learned something about this video. And ang ahang question guys, ako lang isunod sa GC ha. So again, this is Nina and thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye!